This is Verified Human, dialogues exploring psychology, spirituality, culture, and the questions that matter most.
Here we are, right? We've been wanting to do this for a long time.
Yes.
Yeah. A new dialogue talk about two things that we care about a lot, two things that we really resonate with, which is obviously our identity as being part of the queer community and also spirituality.
Mm-hmm. And how we are going to bridge the gap of that.
Yeah. These are two huge topics that I think are very misunderstood or just not really spoken about.
Mm-hmm.
So I would love to understand, because you and I are really kind of diving in as well for the first time because we wanted to do this live, what your journey has been with spirituality from kind of the beginning.
Yeah, a little bit we both have very similar backgrounds with different type of religious starting and jumping points. Mine comes from the Western culture of like Christianity and Catholicism, and just how much that oppressed my way of being human, and being human of being expressive and free and in all forms of that kind of creation. And so it's just like, it took me going to college and studying different religions and also expressing that I wanted to be intimate with with the same sex, that I was diving into myself and diving into more of my spirituality and finding essentially a way to justify my actions of being queer. And because Christianity did not, it shamed and punished, said that was the biggest sin. And I was like, that absolutely can't be, because if Jesus is love, there's got to be another way of another type of philosophy that says that it's true. And so my whole path was studying religions, and Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism was a big part of just saying like being you and being connected to all the elements in yourself and spirit. And that's, I think, when my journey began of spirituality.
Yeah.
How about you, Sathi?
So you're pretty much exploring where in the world it's said that this experience made sense.
Exactly.
And was natural, because Abrahamic religions in particular, and I would say that there is a difference between Jesus, like Jesus Christ and kind of the teachings of Jesus, and then the church.
Yes.
Right?
100%. Because Jesus to me was just like Buddha and all the other different type of, like ancient figures essentially that were just representing of just how the different ways to be human and how to express that, and all about love.
Right.
And that's why I was like, okay, there's not just a Jesus too, because Christianity makes you believe there's only one religion, one Jesus, only one God. And it's like, it was a mind explosion, just understanding when I had read the Mahabharata and just like, oh my God.
Right.
What a cool, many different stories, way better, filled in the gaps of the Christian Bible.
Yeah.
And then I just kept on reading the Book of Enoch, the Book of Enki, like all these different books that were filling in the gaps of Christianity. And that just like formed this whole thing of just how amazing being in spirit, like soul and human, and that connection, and just how queerism, being queer, and that identity was that gateway in that sense. And it was such an impact on my life that I created like a whole book series about it too.
Yes.
Right? Like,
and your story is so it's interesting because I grew up in a Hindu family, so Indian background, born and raised in New York City.
Yeah.
And this is the 90s, early 90s. And yes, it was very, very, very white. I grew up around Greeks and Italians. I went to a church for preschool. I went to a Jesuit school for university. So I grew up around Christianity. And I remember as a little brown kid in that environment.
Adorable brown kid. I saw the baby pictures.
Yes. True story. In my preschool photo, it's a sea of beautiful white, blonde hair, blue eyes. And then they put me in the middle. First row, right in the middle. So it was like this, I don't know, it was adorable. But that
is really cool.
It was a weird experience though, right? Yeah. And I remember wishing I wanted to be Christian.
Wow.
Just because it was the dominant, right? It was the normal, it was the cool. And of course, kids were super racist. Like kids are super, super, super racist, right? And obviously not inherently kids by themselves. I mean, they're getting it from their parents or they're hearing it from somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I do remember growing up inside Christianity indirectly and not really feeling connected to my own faith, right? I didn't really understand it because Hinduism is really different than Abrahamic religions. Hinduism is extremely about rituals, elemental magic. It is what Christianity would look at and be like, oh, that's demonic, right? Just definition, they would call it that. But it's not. It's the most ancient tradition that has swept the entire planet. I mean, there's evidence of, statues of Shiva and Ganesh in Africa, all over the world, right? And it's so ancient. It's known in textbooks as the oldest religion. It's not really a religion, but they call it the oldest religion. So that means it's kind of one of the first, right? Isn't that by definition the oldest one of the first, right? So it's very interesting. And later in life, as I grew up and matured a little bit, I wanted to look back at my roots. So my journey was really initially being really stripped away from my culture, really stripped away from that identity and needing to be more Americanized. I was a first generation kid, right? So you're the bridge between your immigrant parents and the world, right? So they look to you to kind of help them bridge and figure out how the world is. And you are a kid watching people look at your parents weird, watching people tell them, go back to your country, watching your parents that are working super hard, that are actually probably more educated than anybody in the room, and they have an accent, so people don't take them seriously, right? Like my dad is the smartest guy in every room, without a doubt. He's a double PhD physicist. He was brought here because of his brain. He's, cancer researcher. He's worked everywhere from Sloan Kettering, all over the place, right? He's a genius. He's the reason that we're here, but people wouldn't respect him, because he speaks a little bit slower. He can speak English, but he speaks a little bit slower. It's just, imagine moving into a different country at age 30, right? So later in life, I decided to go to India for the first time. And that happened only 4 years ago around. Then I went back 8 times in 3 years. So I was really there every other month, dove into the Vedic path and all the principles and everything, just Bhagavad Gita. And I realized how incredibly scientific it was. Right. And how physics oriented it was. And it was one of the only faith systems that I could say we can actually prove with science.
Exactly. Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's my story. But we do have a guest today.
Yes, we do.
And, I think it's great to have these conversations and bring different people on to discuss because
different perspectives. Yeah.
You and I clearly have a lot of similarities, but we're coming from different angles and meeting in the middle, which is so cool. And so today we are bringing another guest. And so let's talk to Kaleh.
Yeah. Hello, Kaleh.
Hi, Kaleh.
Hi. How's it going? Wonderful introduction, both of you. I loved getting to hear. Just, again, there's a lot of crossover and similarities, but coming from very different worlds and different perspectives. But I love where it ended because it's the same thing, going through different pathways of spirituality. When we're distilling them down, we're finding, right, that commonality.
Right.
And it shows up with different language, with different figures, different people. But similar to mycelial network, it's all talking about, it's all one network reflecting back. And when we really, really distill it down, at least what I keep finding over and over again is we're talking about principles of quantum physics.
Absolutely.
At the end of the day.
Exactly.
Differently explained through different cultures, different frameworks, different lenses. But if you're looking at the similarities, at where these things cross over, where these Venn diagrams start to show, like we have different interpretations of it, but we're really, really actually talking about the very ethos of how the universe is working, which is the unseen world, which is the quantum world, which is the subatomic world that we're in.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
But yes, tell us how you got to knowing all of this, right? So what's your background story and how you got to understanding it to this degree?
Which has been quite an arc from the beginning where it was, because
as it is, right?
Yeah,
it's always
great
a journey.
storytelling is it? Yeah, it's a great arc.
well, and speaking of cultures and the way things show up even differently that are the same, I was raised in what we would call Christianity, quote unquote. However, you know, I'm also Jewish, right? And I was raised in South America. You know, I was born in Argentina, spent my whole childhood traveling throughout South America. Now, the interesting part of it is because even though it was Christianity, it was more of a Judeo-Christian blend. And because of how South America was, especially like I would say pre-internet, pre-westernization, you know, just the blending, especially I would say of American culture making its way down to South America. And so we have a lot more similarities now
Right.
than we ever did, you know, 30 years ago, 25 years ago. But I would say back then, you know, the mystical world, the metaphysical world, which was very much the indigenous spiritual world,
Right.
was very blended in a way with Christianity, in a way that when my family and I immigrated here, which I was, 10, almost 11 years old, I found similar language. Like we were still same Bible, same principles that I was being raised in, but for all intents and purposes, it was American Christianity, which is very different.
Different than South American Christianity
than South American Christianity, which, you know, blends a lot of mysticism almost innately into it, while also ostracizing that same mysticism
So interesting.
in a lot of different ways. And we see a lot of duality then come in and play with it. And so interestingly enough, when we talk about the intersection of queerness, for me specifically, that didn't even come in until after my full deconstruction from Christianity, but also subsequently all organized religions, period.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was actually, but it was queerness that really was that big thread that started to tug at everything. And it really was from a place of starting to understand expansiveness of spirituality. And that was an interesting time for me because up until then, I really had been seeking. I've always been a seeker.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, from the youngest time of just asking why.
Yes.
Right? Like I was the why. And, you know, and so growing up specifically, my parents were regional leaders. And so
Regional leaders in what?
regional leaders of the religious organization. So I grew up as a missionary and a pastor's kid.
Wow. Yeah. You were in it.
I was deeply, deeply ingrained in senior leadership. And so,
You got to really see organized religion from the inside.
I did. And specifically, you know, there were a lot of, global pastors and leaders that would come down as well to meet with my parents. And so I was always the kid there in the meetings, listening to it in the background. And so, you know, also at the same time, you know, being in front of stadiums and it's wild to think about now because of how different
Such a different life.
my life is now, and specifically because of how I've gone back from what was separated from me, which were my indigenous roots, which were my spiritualism that is deeply connected to the land and to nature and to the elements and to energy. And so subsequently, as we find out, so quantum physics by definition with that. But that was something that was not a part of my upbringing.
Right.
But there was always a recognition of the spiritual, of the metaphysical, of the unseen.
That was in you, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was there. It was there, but we just used language such as demons and angels and miracles but it was a very clear recognition of things that defied explanation from what we look at from a traditional, very much Western 3D lens. And so I had that appreciation and that understanding that there was more to it. And I was simply following my path. There was always a seeking of needing to figure out more. And at the time, you know, I understand queerness was a huge part of that. But I didn't have that framework. So because I was raised in South America, because of the environment I was in, I didn't even have any exposure, even from a media standpoint,
To other things.
to anything other than heteronormative, straight narrative.
Of course.
I didn't even know it was an option. I remember the first time anything ever came out was when we heard that Ricky Martin was outed.
Oh, interesting.
Not
What
even
year
tattoo. Everybody like most people.
tattoo is like bend it like Beckham too.
No, because I wasn't in that culture
Because it's
at all.
Ricky Martin, Latin America, right?
Yeah.
Right. So none of that made its way over there. And so I had no idea that I could look back and understand even things like crushes with in school age and dynamics that I had no emotions for.
Yeah.
There just wasn't any language whatsoever for these experiences. So similar to the assembly line, I kind of followed into those footsteps of what had been laid out before me. And so with that, I ended up in theology school, right? And getting a psychology degree. I wanted to understand the human mind. I wanted to understand this human condition that we were in. I wanted to be able to understand this world that had been outlaid for me from a spiritual lens that I was not allowed to question.
Yeah.
When me as an inquisitive mind, I was looking at all of these pieces and I was trying to understand how it fit with where I kept seeing all these other beautiful cultures that had these interpretations of spirituality, and how could we say that that was wrong?
Yeah.
But I had no language for why I felt that way. I just knew I needed to understand this was it. So like any person would, I just dove in 20 times harder and dedicated myself. So I became a theologian. Right. So I was like, okay, so then I'm going to understand the Greek and the Hebrew translations, and I'm going to dive into the text.
Absolutely.
And I kept asking questions, which interestingly put me into dangerous spaces. Quote unquote,
They're like,
where
why are you asking questions?
Why are you asking questions? And being told that there's a certain aspect of the divinity of God that is tarnished if we ask questions too much, because that would take away the mysticism.
Especially in your position being like in the fellowship leadership, like of the church, right? Or was this before or after?
It was both.
It was both,
all
yeah.
of it.
Always asking
It was
questions.
during. And I felt that responsibility from a spiritual standpoint. If you are someone who is in leadership in any capacity in the spiritual sense, you need to understand what it is that you are holding, that what it is that you're carrying. You need to be a student and a continuous student of that. Yeah. And so for me, anytime I saw an inconsistency, I was like, then let's go figure it out. And it was in that standpoint that I started to understand that specifically when it came to queerness, I was getting a lot of cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
To the narrative of anything overlaying evilness to something that was a consensual, loving dynamic.
Something that came from something that is pure and your human nature. You were trying to understand how that could be evil.
Correct. And the further and further I leapt into it with my studies, the more it felt like a lotus leaf just peeling back those layers and understanding that what was being talked about was actually absolutely nothing to do with what we understand today as queerness. And not only that, but the divinity that exists inside of existing outside of the binary, and how that allows for a unique place inside of spirituality, inside of spiritual roles that you wouldn't otherwise have. And so I was more of looking at these things and I was like, not only is this not evil, which is the narrative that is being portrayed here, if you distill the language down, that's not even what it's saying at all.
Exactly.
But not only that, but like, then I went one further layer and started looking at how historically, anthropologically, from our ancestors, the way we have seen queerness and the roles that they have held of regard of a specific like sacred positions inside of culture and society. And so it seemed like it was like actually the reverse. And then, so for me at the time, which is actually quite funny, I felt like I had a heart for the gay community.
You were like an ally, is what you're saying?
I was an ally. I started out as an ally.
You thought you were an ally? Yeah.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Because it was so deeply, deeply ingrained into me. You know, my higher self, I see now, was very much, gently coaxing and leading me through to my own just core truth. Because the whole time understanding that what I was seeking was trying to find out why there was something that I couldn't understand about my own internal experience, that nothing seemed to match. And so it was actually through an understanding of God kind of just breaking out of that concept entirely inside of any religious structure. And it was really actually through my love of science. And it was, for me, from a pattern recognition standpoint, when I started to understand the quantum principles of like the universe, I mean, even something as simple as, you know, something happening on one side of the universe and simultaneously on another side.
Quantum
entanglement. And how that's showing up. And I came across these concepts through just nerding out on science and loving that.
Yeah.
And then finding the crossover of when I was looking at how spirituality was being talked about and how we looked at the text, like from an even like a mathematical standpoint, they're echoes of the same thing, just in a different, with different oration put with it. And so for me, that was a place of like spirituality existing inside of the confines of one thing, like suddenly was tiny and I couldn't exist inside of that. And so for me then to fully deconstruct, so for me, it was a big step to then begin pulling the thread, because at that point I had not really ever questioned. And it was very hard. There's several years of not having any spirituality at all and really kind of questioning everything. You know, it was ungrounding because my entire identity had been built upon my upbringing and around like believing in a God, believing in it in a specific way. But then understanding that, like, even if I couldn't fully understand it, I could not hold on to these things any longer. Like they became sand in my hands. And no matter how much I tried to grasp onto them, it was dissolving before my eyes. And it was actually through that experience of freedom, subsequent freedom. It was very, very hard at first. I wouldn't have described it as freedom at first at all. It actually felt like betrayal.
Yeah.
It felt like it was incredibly ungrounding.
Yeah.
Everything I thought was real and true, all of a sudden wasn't.
Was lied to, lied to.
I was lied to. Well, and I didn't even realize how much I had just built everything else on that. And so it's like Jenga. When you pull the foundational everything breaks.
Yeah.
And so it was then that I gave myself permission to start to actually question everything else, I believe, because if this wasn't true, then what else have I thought? What other cages and prisons have I placed inside of myself that I never even questioned were cages or prisons?
Yeah.
And so, but it was interesting because it was this concept of hell and just these prisons when it came to queerness specifically that were just the final straw for me. And that was years and years. I mean, this was, well over 10 years ago. And since then, coming through my coming out process, not just with my family, but just coming out publicly and just having that actually be pretty much hand in hand the entire time with my spiritual journey. And what was really, really powerful and beautiful is that, being able to dive into my spiritual practices from an ancestral standpoint, from a spiritualist, from an elemental magic standpoint, using the principles of quantum physics overlaid with the mysticism that was there, it was the first place in which my queerness and who I actually am at my core actually has a home inherently in it of itself.
Yeah.
And that was something that was really, really powerful for me, because for the longest time when I had first stepped out of organized religion, it was really kind of with this thought that spirituality and my queerness were just oil and water and we're never going to be able to be hand in hand, when the reality and the truth all along is that they are actually one and the same.
So how would you describe yourself now in terms of your spiritual path and practices?
So there's a lot of different terminologies I would use. What I would say is that I practice. So I would say I'm pagan predominantly, a spiritualist.
Do you want to define like pagan? Like what is the actual definition of paganism?
So it is a blend of many different indigenous and primordial and ancient cultures. And for me specifically, the ones I practice from are the ones from my lineages. So I have Celtic and Nordic ancestry.
Yes.
That is deep part of like how I honor the cycles of nature, how I practice them with my family. You know, we do all of the, you know, pagan traditions, and, you know, Yule instead of Christmas, Ostara instead of Easter. So nature is deeply, has always been a part of my love, but now it's a deep part of my spirituality and my rituals, and the way I practice. And I would say, you know, brujeria, shamanism, from a standpoint of diving into my Mapuche roots, which is Andean, indigenous ancestry. And that has been a very beautiful journey, again, of just starting to learn with a lot of humility, parts of me that have been separated, some mostly before I was even born, and being able to learn about those and with a lot of respect be able to start diving into those practices that were integrated into the land for hundreds and thousands of years. And so I also have some Vedic ancestry. And so for me, you know, when we're talking about quantum physics, I mean, Vedic wisdom and quantum physics are, you know, in so many ways one and the same as well. And so, you know, with great reverence, Hinduism and Vedic wisdom has become such a integral, beautiful part of my faith tradition as well, my spirituality.
Om Namah Shivaya.
Om Namah Shivaya. Yes.
Yeah, it's very beautiful hearing your story. And, you know, paganism is really just the worship of elements and the earth, which is another way people refer to it as pantheism, right? Pantheism is worshiping everything. It's nature, Mother Nature. Nature is the same as we are. So Hinduism is pantheistic. It's all about, you can call it paganism, right? It's paganism, it's pantheistic. It is very much so about your body, your biological body, becoming in tune with the biology of the planet.
It's very similar to Hermeticism as well.
If you look at all of the ancient kind of faith systems, they're all mystical, right? So this is what you would call mysticism. So mysticism, whether it's the mysticism that the Mayans or that they practice by the Andes, or they practice even the Celtic times, or they practice even Kabbalah, right? Even Sufism. These are all mystical forms, right? So all of the mystical forms are going to have similar pagan, pantheistic, you know, Hinduism, right? It's all going to have the same elements. So this is why this is what we're seeing. So religion is very different from spirituality. So I want to say that when we're speaking about spirituality, what do we mean, right? When this is how I would define spirituality. Spirituality to me is ultimately the understanding of how everything works. It starts with yourself. It starts with understanding yourself. It's an internal practice. I would say that's the process. The process starts with going internal, but it ultimately results in an understanding of how everything kind of falls into each other. So spirituality, I would say, is really kind of an essence. It's an essence. It's a way of life. It's how it all kind of fits together. That's how I would describe spirituality.
I love that. How I would describe it is, because I come from the remembrance part of like past and parallel lives and how quantum time and physics. And so mine is remembering how the soul has connected to different planetary type of systems.
Yeah.
Especially on a galactic level, right? And just like how this specific schooling or planet works, but also connecting how the universe works and outside the matrix per se. So it's just that remembrance.
What I love about also Hinduism, the Vedic path, is that it's very cosmic.
Yeah.
So it's really difficult to kind of really go into, and I know all of us here have that commonality of finding this vastness of, we would say, the Vedic tradition, because it's one of the only traditions that really actually, like, these sages wrote down all of these different dimensions and all of it, right?
And again, same with Hermeticism and going back to even Egyptian times as well.
Absolutely.
Which is so connected.
They are.
They're all like, it's...
Because before religion was one type of spirituality, but in different countries there's different language, right? So it's different language, but it's still the same essence. It's still the same spirituality.
It's so cool.
I like to call it, because we're talking about like ancient, every time I think of Hermetic, I think of Vedic, I think of primordial. The word that comes to mind is primordial, the foundation from which things were built upon.
Absolutely.
And the beauty of these is that we have documentation. Right?
Absolutely.
So much has been lost.
Yeah.
Due to not having it documented.
On purpose.
Or hidden. Or hidden.
On
or
purpose,
obscured. Or destroyed.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
All of these things. If you think about it, what has managed to actually make its way through is huge.
Well, again, it's all coming back to the remembrance part. Like, us as souls are starting to wake up and remember our lineage. And like, even you going back home to India, like, I can imagine the way that your body felt so much reverence. And going to, like, if you were to have you been to Ireland? Going to Ireland and connecting with that ground has so much to say.
I want to.
So much to say. And I can and it will literally be like so benevolent to you. And it's just so cool that you're like remembering every single thing of you being primordial and stepping onto this planet and everything else that's connected to it.
Well, when I did go back 4 years ago for the first time, it was mind-blowing, because growing up in a Christian country, and which it is what it is. It's true.
It's so true. Yeah.
The underlying pinnings were very Abrahamic.
Yes.
So going to, part of the world where you're just walking around and you see people that live what some would call mystical, but it's not for them. For them, it's normal. It's their life. Like, yes, on certain days when astrological placements are happening, we do certain rituals. Yes, we eat certain things at certain times of the day, at certain times of the year. Yes, we chant certain words because we know that these words have meaning on the biofield, right? And they're actually going to influence the field. So seeing, Hanuman and Ganesh and Krishna just everywhere was absolutely incredible. And this is why a lot of people who go to India, they either love it or they absolutely hate it, right? It really depends on what you want to see and what you're open to seeing, right? Because what you can see is just a completely different way of life, especially if you're coming from the West. If you're coming from the West and you're going to India, you will see an entirely different way of life and things.
And not open to it if you're not, you're completely rejecting it. If
100%.
Not open to it,
Because it is loud, it is crowded, it is weird. If you're going to come from the Western lens, it's going to be weird, right? But it's so incredibly sacred, and people truly, like, you can feel the devotional energy as they do and perform these things.
Yeah.
What was really, I would say, disappointing is, being a American-born, Indian,
right,
and going back to India and then going back and forth, right, so many times, 8 times. I really got to see people my age, right, around my age, and I got to see how what they feel about being from India and how they are seeing the world. And it's pretty divided.
Really?
India's really divided. I find it to be objectively one of the most interesting countries to look at and to just watch, to see how things are unfolding. One, highest number of Gen Z millennials in the world.
Oh, wow.
Highest number of digitally literate people. So they really understand technology.
Yeah.
English as pretty much a dominant second language. Everyone pretty much knows English. Fastest growing GDP. So the country's booming.
Yeah.
For all intents and purposes, this country's growing. And so as I'm watching it, I saw a lot of people around my age that were very disconnected from their roots. They were very disconnected from it. They were still, and of course, it's a complicated history. There was, British colonialism that was there for a very long time. And everything changed. So I think this is a pretty commonly known fact amongst at least the Indian community, but Great Britain became Great Britain because of India.
Oh yeah.
Great Britain stole I think it's like $77 trillion of like resources and gold and gems. They took all of that wealth from India because India was absolutely rich in terms of resources, just like Africa, right?
I was about to say, Africa
rich,
too, yeah.
Rich, right? And because of that, the colonial kind of mindset, that hierarchy structure really is still slightly embedded. Not in everyone, but it's still there. So I saw a lot of people around my age very disconnected from their roots, very disconnected from Hinduism, and wanting to be part of the trends, wanting to be more westernized.
Yeah.
And it's just like, wow, like why would you want to do that? Because now I'm like, how did I ever look back at like young Sathi and say like, oh, I wish I was something else. I wanted to be white. I wanted to be Christian. I'm so incredibly proud of coming from where I come from and representing a modern Hindu.
Yeah.
Right.
How was it going back and you being queer? Because I remember when I went there, it was very interesting. I went there one time with a woman that I was dating, and I went with another woman and then a man, and they were more understanding that he had 3 wives rather than me actually being married to one of the women.
Where did you go in India?
I went to the Golden Triangle. So I went to Jaipur, I went to Taj Mahal, I went to Mathura. I also went to Delhi.
Yeah.
And so all those places, and they were more, they just were more understanding of that. So I want to know, for your experience, bringing it back to being queer and spirituality, of just how your viewpoint was, and how, again, the disassociation from their religion or their spirituality. What was that kind of like gap in that you felt? Did you feel comfortable, or what else?
It's a great question, because I actually want to go into something that is really important to talk about and understand as we're talking about these subjects, right? There's culture. There's spirituality, right? There's your spirituality. There's your original ancient kind of traditions in your spirituality. Then there's culture that stems from other things. It's influenced by politics. Then there's politics. Politics is a very, very, very big reason that culture is created, right? Because politics kind of rules what is deemed appropriate, what is deemed popular, what is legal, what is not legal. What types of media can you consume? So with that lens in mind, the British colonized India, right? They ruled India.
And media.
So a lot of things about India completely changed. So there's it's mixed. It's so layered, because the culture is conservative. The culture is influenced by the politics. But the culture is not reflective of the original essence of India.
Original essence.
Because the original essence of India is incredibly queer.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
I would say Hinduism and India really have done they were role models in how to live in fluidity.
The first of Tantra.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And so in Hinduism, there isn't such a thing as like heaven or hell, right? And there also isn't such a thing as good and evil. It is integrated. So, it's good and evil, heaven and hell, right? Heaven and hell is what you create based on, how you choose to walk through this Maya. Maya is a word that means illusion. So we live in a Maya. We live in many Mayas. There's a lot of illusions that we live in, right? And so I would say that, that experience is kind of a mixed and layered, right? And also Hinduism is very different than Islam. Islam is part of the Abrahamic trio. Islam had also had influence in India. So, talk about the British colonization, then you have the Islamic, kind of movement, and then you have the Hindus that are by nature very secular. Like by nature, Hinduism isn't. I can't be a proper Hindu and say like this is the only way. Like this is the only way, right? This is why I respect and I love different perspectives, and I love talking about this and hearing different angles of where we come from. But Hinduism doesn't have rules, and to place rules on something that doesn't have rules it doesn't make sense.
It's retroactive.